So, the masks. Complaint number one, I can't breathe when I wear the mask. You can, or you're sick. It's pretty simple, and not everything is simple. This is. If you cannot breathe when you put on this mask, then you have a respiratory ailment. You have something is wrong. And given that there is a global pandemic of respiratory ailments going on, it is possible that you might want to go get that checked out. People have been wearing these things for decades. Millions of people, they wear them. Doctors wear them for hours on end. Woodworkers wear them for hours on end to prevent sawdust and whatnot getting in their respiratory system. They're worn everywhere, all over the world. People wear them just fine. You can breathe through them unless you have a respiratory illness. So if you do, let me clarify. If you put the mask on and cannot breathe or have great difficulty breathing, then you really need to go see a doctor. Now, granted, this is the United States of America, so that may itself be a tenuous proposal, but that's a separate discussion. Generally speaking, if you're healthy and you put the mask on, you can breathe. This has been researched, and that excuse just doesn't hold up. It may be a little uncomfortable at first, a little awkward. There will obviously be a very slight, there will be a very slight increase in the difficulty of breathing, but it's so slight that you would get used to it after a short time if you didn't focus directly on it. So, concern number two, people say, well, it's going to trap carbon dioxide. I'm going to suffocate myself. As noted in point number one, that's not true. You can breathe with the thing on. So first of all, there's no volume there. In order for carbon dioxide to be a problem, you have to have some quantity of it, a large quantity. It's relative. This thing over your face, there isn't enough volume there to trap any carbon dioxide. If all of the space between your skin and the mask was full of carbon dioxide and you inhaled all of it, you'd be fine. And you'd also, because your breath is bigger than that, you would get a bunch of air in behind it. But none of that's true, that you don't need to worry about it, because the mask doesn't trap it. And that leads me to point number three, where people say, well, it doesn't trap the virus either. Okay. You got to pick one of those two complaints. Complaint that it traps carbon dioxide and complaint that it doesn't trap the virus. The SARS-CoV-2 virion, the actual virus itself, is a big ball of molecules, right? Well, if that can go through the mask, which it can, there's no way that carbon dioxide can't. That's a tiny little carbon. It's 3 atoms, right? It is a tiny little molecule, carbon dioxide. And oxygen is even smaller. So if the virus can go through the mask, then you are absolutely 100%, you can be completely confident that oxygen and carbon dioxide are sailing right through without any difficulty, which is the truth. But then we go back to this thing, but well, if it doesn't trap the virus, what's the point of wearing it? It's not supposed to trap the virus. The point of wearing it is to trap the big, gooey, nasty gobs of moisture that you spew forth when you cough or talk, or go on a tirade on YouTube. That's the goal. That's what the mask is for. That's what can't get through the mask. And then people say, the next complaint is, they say, well, then that would only really work at preventing me from giving it to others rather than preventing me from getting it. Well, first of all, it works both ways. If someone, spews forth a giant, splattering of saliva, it will provide a shield. Now, you'd want to take it off very quickly after that and replace it. But it would work both ways, A. And B, the general assertion that it's to prevent you from giving it to others is correct. You say, well, I'm not sick. Why do I have to worry about it? Well, first of all, if you're having trouble breathing when you put one of those on, you might be. Second of all, whether you're sick or not is completely irrelevant. There's SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus, and there's COVID-19, which is the disease. And we have seen from the fact that this thing spread around the entire world quite easily, and the numbers are rising again quite easily, that it can be spread very easily, and not all of the people who have the virus are suffering terribly or even noticeably ill. You get tested and it comes back positive, and you're like, well, I might have sniffled a little, but I didn't, not all of the cases are where people are in the hospital dying. So you may not be noticeably sick. You may not think you have the virus, and that's fine. You still might have it. it's inconclusive yet whether you can actually get a substantial load of SARS-CoV-2 and pass it on and never get COVID-19. Doesn't matter. What matters is that the thing is spreading wildly, and yes, the goal of the mask is to prevent you from giving it to other people, and it does also provide some prevention of you getting it from other people in the form of, you're not inhaling their giant saliva droplets or whatever hideousness they're spewing out. And then the last thing people say is, well, is there any proof that the mask works? Do we know that it works? We have almost all of the people who are doing research on this saying that it probably helps. But that doesn't sound very convincing, does it? So let's give you the benefit of the doubt and say, nah. Let's assume that it does not help at all. It doesn't hurt. It's a thing that we think might help, and it doesn't hurt. So there's no downside to it. Even if it turns out in the end that wearing the mask did absolutely nothing to prevent the spread of, I can do this without coffee, the virus. Well, so what? If it doesn't, and nothing to prevent the spread of the virus, you still are not hurting. You're not losing anything. It's definitely not exacerbating the virus. It's not going out there and causing it to become worse. It's not magically teleporting it from your mouth to the mouth of the next person who's wearing a mask. So what's the downside? If you're right, if it doesn't do anything to prevent it, there's no downside. You look awkward. Okay, you look awkward anyway, let's be honest. There's no harm. So yeah, it might not do anything. You know what else has never done anything? The life vests on airplanes. I don't know if you've ever flown. Every flight, everywhere, they always give you this spiel about, in the event of a water landing, your vest is under your seat, put it on, clip it around, don't pull a little thing until you're out of the plane, and then pull the thing, and if that doesn't work, you can blow in the tube. Whoop-de-doo. Hey, guess what? In all of the millions of flights, and probably billions cumulatively of individual passengers who've flown on airliners, in all of the history of aviation, there's never been a single person who has benefited from one of those life vests. At some point you would think, well, gee, why don't we get rid of them? Because they don't hurt anything. There's still the possibility that at some point a plane might land in the water and someone might need to have a life vest. It doesn't hurt you anything to have it sitting there under your seat for the entire flight. So there's no harm. Does it do any good? Apparently not. There's no reason to think that they are particularly useful. Sooner or later, the airlines will catch on to that and get rid of them, or lobby the FAA to let them get rid of them, etc., etc. But the point is, the mask's the same thing. Does it do any good conclusively? No, we do not have conclusive evidence that it actually works. Great, but so what? You don't need that. That's not the way precaution works. There are two concluding things I want to add on here. The first is to do with carbon dioxide. It's not as bad as you would like to think it is, and what I mean by that is if your car, like most cars, has a recirculated air setting that prevents it from taking in fresh air from outside and instead just causes it to recirculate the same air, you are exposing yourself to plenty of carbon dioxide. Some cars, that setting, the recirculated air, will turn off automatically after a given time. In some semi-trucks, you'll actually get a warning message that'll pop up that'll say, hey, bub, you need fresh air. It's been 20 minutes. Turn that thing off. Because you don't want to put yourself to sleep. So you will be in environments where you get a lot more carbon dioxide than this thing could even remotely possibly, this thing being that thing, give to you. I say all this, wear these masks. This is a big emphasis right now. There is an obvious possibility here for negatively discriminatory behavior, and it's possible you'll go out in public, you'll see someone not wearing a mask. What is important is that we not prejudge these people. We not say, oh, that's an asshole who just wants to spread the plague. He's too lazy, or doesn't want to affect his image, so he's not going to wear a mask and he's going to put everyone else at risk. Now, there are people like that, certainly, plenty of them. But what we don't want to do is just assume that that's the case. There are people with breathing complications. There are people who have a harder life than you, who may have very valid reasons for not wearing a mask. And they still need to go out in public because they can't afford or don't have access to a social net that would get them groceries or take their kids to daycare or whatever. So there will be people out there you see without a mask. that may just have to do. That's the situation they're stuck in, and the last thing they need is for the rest of us to get self-righteous and start preaching to them that they're bad because they're not wearing the mask. And even if that's only 1 out of 100 non-mask wearing people, it would be a mistake to just assume that about the people who aren't wearing the mask. So for all this wear the mask thing, at the same time, don't find another way to hate other people. Especially people who are not conforming, they may have reasons. It's possible that you don't know what those reasons. You definitely don't know what those reasons would be. So don't just you do your thing. You worry about you, and don't find another reason to hate people.